part of ultra running. As we seek the buckles, the finish lines, and the crazy distances, we experience a lot of failure along the way too. I'm Heidi.
And I'm Michelle, and we're both ultra runners and ultra running coaches who want to know more about the dreaded DNF, how, when, and why they happen, but more importantly, how we learn, we move forward, and we get back up to run again.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Let's Run That Again. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Heidi Baker.
I'm Michelle Goldberg.
And we are here to talk about DNFs and the hard races in ultra running and how we can deal with them, learn from them, and grow from them. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you can leave a review and share with your family and friends, it's always helpful and appreciated. Today, we are excited to welcome Emily Lyons to the show. Emily is a very experienced ultra runner who always fills her calendar with tons of races. When we asked her upcoming events on the pre-interview questionnaire, she responded with 8 races she has coming up. She is a 2 times Badwater 135 finisher, and I can speak from experience in saying she is a fun and motivating person to be around. So welcome, Emily.
Thanks, Heidi. Loved the intro.
So we just kind of always start our episodes with kind of getting just a brief rundown of how you got into the sport and discovered ultra running and just kind of your experience with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first ultra was in 2016 at the Southern Tour Ultra 50K, the first year of it. It's outside of Wilmington, which is where I live, Wilmington, North Carolina. And it was my first 50K as well as my first marathon. I'd done a handful, maybe 2-3 half marathons before that. A bunch of Spartan races. I was really into Spartan races back then. But yeah, the Southern Tour was my first 50K. I can't remember. There were kind of 3 things that got me into ultras. And I don't remember which happened first. It kind of maybe all happened at the same time as Southern Tour Ultra 50K. So I heard that, was coming up around in the area. So I'm like, that sounds fun. So I signed up for that. And then I'm vegan, which 2 minutes, took me 2 minutes to tell you guys I was vegan. So I was looking up like kind of cool vegans, especially like athletes, and Katja Corbett kept coming up, known as Dirt Diva. And she's badass. She's done now over 200, 100 mile distance races. So I was like, wow, that's cool. I want to be like her, And then 3, of course, read Born to Run, which is like an ultra running, kind of classic books. And that made me want to go out and run 50, 100 miles. So, so that was 2016, did my first 50K. 2017, completed my first 50 miler at Badwater, Cape Fear, which is Bald Head, about 45 minutes from me. And then in 2018, did my first 100 miler at Canal Corridor. So that's sort of like a abridged high level sort of summary of my intro into ultra running.
Yeah. I love that.
So what was it about ultra running that kept you going back? Because just from what I know about you, you are constantly racing. Like, you keep your calendar full. So like, what was it that made you want to just do it and do it all the time?
I feel like it's a very common personality trait in ultra running is that you're really type A, and when you like something, you really like something, So when I get into something, I really get into something. And so ultra running, it's just, suffering for fun, that type 2 kind of fun. And I know there's some people who like to maybe do 1 or 2 races a year, which is really respectable, actually like train for them and perform really well. But I just love going out and seeing everyone and like doing the races. Could I perform better at races if I didn't pack my calendar? Like you said, probably. But I just love being there. It's sort of like a mini reunion. The ultra community feels really large, but you guys know it's this like small niche community, and you see the same people at like every race. And I love going to ultra sign up, looking at the entrance and seeing at least one familiar name. So I think that's what keeps me coming back. And also, I tell people, like, if I like to have my buckles next to me on my desk. So like I've got, like my Badwater buckle, and I'll look at it and be like, if I can do that, I can send that email that I don't want to send right now. Like these other problems I'm having right now are not issues when I, spent 40 hours trying to survive in Death Valley. So it just kind of puts perspective, like ultra running puts perspective on other areas of my life that I really enjoy.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I think having that perspective is it's just so amazing, and having that reminder, and it can be very grounding in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. My background outside of running is like accounting, kind of business, security. So, very type A, but ultra running gets me into that kind of like woo woo side of
Yeah.
me, like because, you get into like those other thoughts. Like, I can't think of it. Kind of not hippy dippy, but I'm trying to think of like a good word to describe that. But it like allows me to access that other side of my thinking other than like, rigid type A, gotta do it exactly like this. Ultra running allows you to be like flexible and kind of gives you that like la-di-da feeling throughout the rest of your life.
Yeah, I think that like you let go of a lot of those layers that we need to stay in touch with to be in that sort of
Realm.
that realm,
Yeah.
right? To be in that mode, we get to let go of that and just sort of be a bit more introspective and
Yeah, exactly.
just
Yes. Yeah.
That's awesome.
when I worked in a tangent, when I worked in like more of an office setting, I used to love coming back to work on a Monday morning after having done an ultra over the weekend, and people would be like, "So, how was your weekend? Like, what did you do?" And I'm thinking, like, shit, do I explain how I stayed up for like 36 hours and I like ran outside in the hot, like, and I ate gels and
Yeah.
like how do I just that self-satisfaction of bringing that back into your day-to-day life, that sufficiency, like, yeah, I did that.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. All my coworkers know too. So now anytime I'm out of the office, they're like, "Hey, what crazy race did you do now?" It's just like they like hearing about it. I try not to go in detail unless they ask. I'm like, maybe me telling you about how I poop next to the road is a little TMI for a 9 a.m. status call. But if you want to know, I'll tell you.
It's awesome.
That's great.
So you've done Badwater 2 times now.
Yeah.
And that's pretty epic.
Yeah, and that's Badwater 135.
Yeah.
Have you also done Salton
She's
Sea
done them all.
and yeah, multiple times, right?
Yeah, so Cape Fear, like I said, that was my first 50 miler, my first 50 miler that I completed. So that was awesome, kind of that intro into the Badwater family in 2017. And then I went back and did 50 miler again in 2018, 2019, 2023, and 2024. And in 2023 and 2024, that was part of the Ultra Cup, which includes Salton Sea. So, I've done the Ultra Cup last year and this year. And love them all. They're all awesome. They're all really hard. Salton Seas are really cool. They're all really cool, of course, but everyone knows 135. Salton Sea, I know why it's Emily Ryan's favorite Badwater race. It is just like a little baby Badwater. You can do it in like 24, 28 hours. It's awesome. But yeah, I'm obsessed with the Badwater family. I got my Badwater shirt on. Yeah, they're great races. Like, the ultra running is a niche community. The Badwater family is like a niche community within our niche community.
A niche within a niche.
A niche within a niche, yeah. And it's inclusive. It's not, they're not, excluding anyone. Go to any of the races as a volunteer or crew or runner and you're part of the Badwater family. It's like the other races, they're like mini reunions, and that extends out to kind of sister races like the Keys or Daytona, and then there's other races that you're going to see a ton of Badwater people at. So it's crazy to think that I'm a 2 times Badwater 135 finisher, because back in the day you think it's only like superhumans like Scott Jurek or Pete Kostelnik or even David Goggins, but
Right.
then you meet all these like regular people and you're like, maybe I can do it too. And then you do it and you're like, oh, I guess I can do it too. It's pretty cool.
I remember meeting you at the Cape Fear 24-hour last year. And I had known you on Instagram, but then I met you and I was running with Lawrence that day.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh yeah, Emily, he's described you as like the most badass normal ultra runner he knows. Like, it was like, she's like us. She's a normal ultra runner. She's not like a podium chaser or anything like that, but she does like the most badass things. So That was like one of my first experience with you, like the description, and I loved that.
That's
Oh my gosh,
awesome.
that's awesome. I love Lawrence. He's so cool. I see
He's
him at
fun.
like Umstead and like kind of the North Carolina like local races. But
Yes.
yeah, it's totally true. You know, I tell people, I'm like, you could do it. You just really want to. Like, you have to want to do this stuff, you know? And some races also have the other barrier. Like, some are really expensive. Like, Badwater 135 is a very
Yeah.
expensive race.
Yeah.
But if I like won, you know, like a lottery or something, I would want to set up like some Badwater 135 scholarships because I feel like that's a barrier to entry for some people.
For a lot of races, I feel like it's just
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when you're getting into the 200 plus, those,
Yep.
I mean, those are pricey.
They're outrageous. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to mention the travel and everything else over multiple days.
travel, crew, like
Yeah.
food,
Yeah.
just all of it. Yeah.
And it makes sense. Like, I'll speak to like the race price, you know, like a lot of goes into that.
Oh, yeah,
So I'm not
absolutely.
saying that that's too expensive, but it's just, you know, like the costs really add up when you start getting into these like long distance races.
And just realistically, it can be a barrier to entry for a lot of people. But I know a lot of races are starting to kind of work on scholarship programs and things. So that's a start.
Like I know Cocodona, they have like a scholarship for like their 250, which I think is pretty cool. And others have like payment plans, so you don't have to drop the whole like $2,000. You know, when you sign up, you can do a deposit and then pay monthly. So that's other ways. But yeah, normal person doing cool races, you know. And another person I can think of off the top of my head that kind of fits that description too is Wendy Murray. She, you know, I love that she's just, you know, this unassuming person. You see her, she's big smiles, and then you see her ultra sign up, and it's like, God, you know, she's done Vol State, and she's done Badwater, the Ultra Cup, and she's done Tar Heel, I think 367, and all these races, and same with like Lisa McFadden and all these people that you guys may also know. Yeah, that's another reason I love ultra running is you can't judge a book by its cover, you know.
I've got to try to get Lisa on to talk about Barkley.
Oh yeah, exactly. Barkley's, Western States. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I really would love to have her on because she was at Barkley, and that's just incredible.
Yeah, and she's so nice.
She's the sweetest.
Just smiling the whole time. I mean, she is a fixture at Umstead 100. So if you're having a bad time at Umstead, just wait till you can see Lisa, and then you're like, okay, I feel better now. With see Lisa smile.
That's fantastic.
So I wasn't going to ask about this till later, but since we've kind of talked about those bigger races, you have a huge race on your upcoming calendar.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So I'm kind of skipping the 200, not on purpose, but going straight to the 300 with the Arizona Monster 300. So I've been wanting to do like a 200, like a Cocodona or Moab or Bigfoot. And then I saw Arizona Monster 300 kind of pop up and was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. I love Arizona. I want to get into like these longer races, which I've heard as being described as catered backpacking trips, which is totally true. You just kind of backpack the whole time. They feed you. They got little cots you can sleep on. And I was watching as the entrance list filled on Arizona Monster, and I was like, kind of getting FOMO. And with the last few spots, I hopped in. I was like one of the barriers, like we were talking about earlier, is just because of the race price. But I think I'm going to regret not doing it. It's an inaugural year. Yeah, I need to figure out the logistics of that. That's probably one of the hardest things about these like long form races is like the logistics, crew, how are the crew going to get there? Who's my crew? How are they going to get there? How are they going to crew the race? And then also for me as the runner, like how am I going to run this race? What am I going to pack? What am I going to put in my drop bags? And then on top of that, since there's no race the prior year, I can't read race reports or ask people. It's going to be an adventure. I think we get 7 days and some change to finish it. So it's 300 miles up the Arizona Trail, I think. I don't know. I feel like I should be researching it by now, but I've got so much on my plate. I'm like, I'll think about that in the future. But yeah, so that's my next huge race coming up is the Arizona Monster 300.
Wow. I'm excited to follow along and hear about that.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, I love the area. I just got back from a week-long trip in Arizona with my mom. So I think, while I'm suffering, I'll be like, well, at least I'm like in Arizona and I like Arizona. So, And in April, when the race is, it'll probably have that mix of really hot and really cold. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, you'll definitely get the full range of weather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So with any of these big, huge races, these big, huge challenges, there's inherent risk because we all know nothing in life is guaranteed. And at the end of a day, a race is just a day like any other day, and all kinds of things can happen. And we like to talk about sometimes when things don't go the way you expected them to, and they don't play out the way you thought. And you shared with us there was it the long haul 100 where
Yeah.
things didn't quite go as planned? Would
Oh, yeah.
you would you be willing to dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Long Haul 100 was just like a series of errors that like ended at DNFs. I did it last year, 2023, and I was finished in like 20, I forget, 20, it was either on the cusp of 25 and 26 or on 24 and 25. I forget the exact timing, but I knew you got like a green buckle if you did sub 24, and I'm like, I've done that before, so I think I can get that, sub 24 or sub 24 buckle. So I'm going to sign up for the 2024 race. And it was a new course, so it would be even flatter and even less technical because it is technically a trail race. It is a Western States qualifier if you finish sub 30. But, it's like really easy trails. It's like really flat, it's grassy. And so this year, I think I just was too cocky, like normally I'm really like planned really well. I've got everything packed and I'm like, long haul, I'm just going to pack my stuff and show up. And the first error was I realized, actually I booked my flight back home too early. I booked it like kind of Sunday at 1 or something like that. Again, the cockiness, I'm going to, finish it really fast or whatever. And so that was error number 1. Error number 2 is I forgot my drink mix at home. So I like to use Scratch in my drink mix for electrolytes and for calories. So I was like, and I'm drinking that, like literally the whole race, I'm drinking Scratch. So I'm like, okay, on top of these errors, I'm a really flexible person. So I'm not like freaking out. It's not like if I had left something for Badwater. Not saying long haul isn't like awesome, but it's not as much planning as like a Badwater. So I was like, all right, I left my drink mix. That stinks, but I'll just try to eat more calories, and drink stuff at the aid stations and all that. So yeah, forgot my drink mix. And then this isn't an error on my part. Maybe it is because I didn't really calculate it into like my strategy, but it rained a lot before the race. And so it just created like a mud pit through a lot of the course. And the course is
I
like,
heard there was a ton of mud.
that sucked so bad. There was one part towards the last like 5 miles of the loop. I think it's like a 16 mile, something like loop. You do 8 times.
You do it multiple times. Yeah.
Yeah, you do it.
Same spot.
Yeah, so there's one spot that was just like soul sucking, shoe sucking mud, and you had to walk through it. And yeah, so that's beating you down. Towards, I forget exactly when I started feeling crappy. Like other than regular 100-mile crappy, but it's like even more crappy than normal was like I was looking up at the sky and it was kind of wavy and I'm like, well, that sucks. And my chest was starting to get really crappy and I'm like, man. And then I start kind of dry heaving, which normally I don't get nauseous at a race. So that stunk. And it was just the combination of like the mud, which slowed me down a lot, to not having like those extra calories in my bottle. And I doubt I was keeping up with it. So I was getting really behind on electrolytes and on calories. And then it was right after, of course, like Christmas. It's that early January, like maybe mid-January. So I think I had picked up some kind of chest crud from my nephew who was like 1 because he was sick. And then, yeah, so I'm getting to maybe mile 80. I had 1 more lap to go and I just kind of sat down. And the lap before I'm like, I'm not finishing. Like this sucks. Like I feel like crap. And it's not regular 100-mile crap. It's like my chest hurts and then of course there's that one and then I'm started thinking of all the other reasons. Well, if I could keep going, but like I'll get to the airport and I'll be just a muddy mess. Like I can't do that. I can't walk on the plane like this. And of course, my rational brain right now is like, you can push your flight or catch another flight. Like it's not a big deal. but it was just kind of like adding on to the list of why I'm going to DNF. And then, I could slog it out for this last lap where I can go home now and just kind of sleep in the bed. It's just all these things coming together. So I decided before the last lap, I'm like, I'm just going to call Stu, my husband, and be like, hey, come get me. So I like texted him and called him. It was like 4 a.m. I was like, hey, come get me. I'm done. He's like, are you sure? Like, you don't want to keep going? I'll go out with you. I'm like, nah, like, I don't need to think about this. Like, I'm just done, and, like, I don't feel bad about it. I don't, I'm not going to regret this. Like, just get me the hell out of here. And so, yeah, that was my first 100-mile DNF, and I still don't regret it. It's a learning, experience, and I've got that little red line at the bottom of my ultra sign. And yeah, it's just kind of like, for all my other races, obviously do double check that I've packed everything I need. And if pack everything I need that I can't get like at the race,
Right.
like my specific drink mix or whatever. And then obviously don't be cocky with booking your travel back, allow for enough time for, up to the cutoff, that would be another thing I would do next time. And what else? And part of the reason I didn't really care about the DNF was I've learned in ultra running to kind of kill my running ego. That like I want to go faster and I want to like go longer and finish harder and just I'm more like flexible, more go with the flow. So that's why I was like, I can keep going, I can finish, but I just really don't want to, And I had learned from, I don't know if you know Ed the Jester, Ed Edding. Yeah, he's awesome. I had ridden with him last year, no, 2022, after crewing at Badwater, about like 3 or 4 hours with my friend Peggy. And he was telling me about, he's done the most hundreds, but he also has probably the most DNFs. So who cares about a DNF? So that's all going through my head at long haul. But yeah, I'm going to go back in 2025. I'm already signed up, and hopefully get the green buckle. But another reason I also didn't really care if I DNF'd was like it sucked so much that like Harvey Lewis almost DNF'd. Like he basically just hung out in his tent for hours and was like gonna quit. But like someone like gave him a rousing speech, and so of course he has all these hours of buffer time because he went out and still probably finished within 24, 25 hours or something. But that made me feel a little better, even though I don't care about DNFs. I was like, Harvey Lewis almost DNF'd, and I did. So, like, that makes me feel a little better.
Absolutely, kind of that validation that
the validation,
that a really, really strong runner can still have a really sucky time in this mess of circumstances.
Oh yeah, and another reason I love Harvey Lewis is like some of like the elite people will go out and they're not having an A race, they drop, which I mean, cool, save your energy for other races and sponsors or whatever. But I love that even if he's having a crappy race, he goes out and finishes it.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think there are many, many reasons to love Harvey Lewis.
Oh
He's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, just an all-around awesome guy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that this is not the first time that I've heard someone talk about scheduling their return trip home
Yeah,
too
what a
early,
rookie move. Like,
and
come
how
on.
how that can contribute to that sort of like I need to be done with this kind of. Yeah, it's interesting. So I think that's perhaps a really simple lesson for everyone, that give yourself plenty of time for leaving after a race. And Emily, like you said, plan for the full cutoff time.
Yeah.
And a little buffer after that before you need to get your transportation out of there.
Exactly. And if that were the only factor, I would have been like, oh, whatever, we'll miss it, we'll move it, like, no big deal. But it was like, just like maybe, item number 5 on the DNF list. I think the really big thing, and I'm not trying to make excuses, but I think it was really that chest crud I picked up from my nephew. Like that just made,
just makes you feel
I know
crappy.
normal tiredness, but it's like that chest tiredness where you're like, this, I don't know if I should keep going. I mean, normally I'd fight through it, but then I had reason number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm like, I'm just
Yeah. It sounds like the right call at the right time. I love that you're able, and you've had a little time away from it now, but that you're able to kind of go through and see those different factors. And I think like when you can go back and logically kind of break it down and be like, here's several different things that kind of came into play together. And the scratch, like, that's interesting because I can identify to wanting to be able to be more flexible with my nutrition and hydration plan. Like, I know people who can just roll up to a race and they're like, yeah, whatever, I'll just drink what they have. Like, I don't even think about it. I have one friend who, like, she's just like, yeah, sometimes I forget to bring my own water, but like, and she does really, really well, like every time. But I usually have like, my favorite products or my go-tos, and then I maybe supplement with what they have. And so there's like that sort of that struggle, or that you want to be flexible and be able to, use what they have. But at the same time, when you train with something and you've got what really, really works for you, I think that's a lesson we've all learned in some capacity or another. Make sure you've got it on race day.
Yeah.
Just in case. And even if they had scratch at the race, like sometimes, you go and like maybe it's really diluted.
Yeah.
And then you're not actually getting the calories and whatnot that you expect it
like
to.
I mean, I know exactly how much Tailwind gets me, like how many carbs per hour, and like and so I have it like pre-measured in exactly what I need. And it's like, yeah, you could go, get something at an aid station, but you don't know exactly what amount of carbs or you're getting, and that can make a difference when you're used to a certain amount.
Exactly. And then sometimes maybe with a rule race, they're using like this, like almost, water hose water. So you're like, what is this extra like minerals I'm getting in here? It just tastes like someone's like, hose water, like with a little bit of Tailwind mixed in,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And no shade to them. That's the water they got to use. But it's like, ugh,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's important to note like that you're not inexperienced at the 100-miler, it, but you're speaking to how you always kind of have to respect it because it's a long distance. And, I feel like that's kind of a recurring theme sometimes, is that we get a little cocky and like think, oh, well, I've done this before. It's no big deal. Sure enough, like it's 100 miles. A lot of different things can go wrong, and like always got to respect the distance.
Yeah, exactly. And sorry, can you hear any background noise in my?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, let me just kind of move. But yeah, 100 definitely, like people say there's like easy hundreds, which there's no easy 100. They're all really fun. There may be some that are easier, just based on the course and weather and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, definitely 100 is a distance that you have to respect. If you don't, it'll chew you up, spit you out. So yeah, sometimes I go into a race, and every time I go into a race too cocky, I'm like, this is going to end poorly for me. And it does. Whether it's because I DNF, like long haul, or I just feel like crap and have to death march. Every time I go into a race too cocky, like another example is, I don't know if you guys know the boogie, Midnight Boogie 50-miler.
No.
It's a very rural race. It's kind of a hidden gem. I think this year was the last year, unfortunately. They've been doing it for about 30 years. But it's an overnight 50-miler in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina, Ellerby. And there's also a marathon, but it's basically these country roads. It's the middle of June. It starts at 6 p.m. And a bunch of my friends have done it. And so I did it for the first time in 2022. And I'm like, 50 miles, easy peasy. Right. Yeah, I can do this. And God, did it whoop my ass. Like, it just, it's hot, it's humid. Like, I was going too fast up the hills. And I basically walked probably the last like 20 miles. That was just, I went in too cocky. And now every time I go into a race too cocky, I'm like, this is going to end bad. And it always does. So I try not to go in. I try to go in very humble and plan everything. But sometimes I'm just like, I'm just going to wing this, and yeah. Sometimes it works. Most of the time it does not. So
What was your first race after long haul 100 last January? Or
So this January?
Yeah.
Good question. So I did probably like a marathon or something. My next big race after long haul was probably Badwater Cape Fear. Yeah, I think Badwater Cape Fear 50 miler. Because I
Because
don't
that's
think there
earlier
was.
in the year too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because long haul, yeah, is mid-January, and then I don't normally do any ultras in like February, and
Mm-hmm.
then like I've got, like I said, like some marathons thrown in there, but I think my next like ultra like big race would have been Badwater Cape Fear.
So, how did your experience with Long Haul 100 change your perspective or your planning going into Cape Fear this year?
I mean, probably definitely made me like plan, like make sure I had all my stuff together a little better, like maybe make sure I had all my things I needed. Although it's 45 minutes from my house, it's kind of a pain to
Mm-hmm.
get there. You got the ferry and all that. But like I knew if, and I was getting there kind of a week early. I do it as a beach week with my family. So I wasn't stressed about that. It was the first race of the Ultra Cup, so of course like I need to finish, but I've done it 4 times already. I'm close to my house if I need anything. Maybe the next race where I really thought about long haul would have been Umstead 100. Because I did that, I think, a couple weeks after Cape Fear. So, done that race. It was my second 100 in 2019. So, I was doing it again. It's on like, not home turf, but I do love running through Umstead. It's in Raleigh. And so, that was a race where, like, okay, don't go in like easy peasy. We're just gonna finish this like long
Done this
haul.
before.
Exactly, done this before. Yeah, so probably I would have like packed maybe a little more deliberately and had a little checklist and all of that. So yeah, and I did finish Homestead, so that's good.
That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would guess that if you're going back to do some of the same races again, you might a little bit more run that risk of, oh yeah, I'm familiar with this, like I got this. You're
yeah,
like, this is cool, I've done this before. Yeah. But needing to really like stay humble and like Heidi said, respect that that's
yeah. Respect the
another
distance.
day.
Because even if you finish, I mean, I'd rather finish feeling good for most of the race than death march the last 30 miles. That
Yep.
just stinks. I mean, of course we all love suffering, but if we can avoid a little bit of it, like by like doing things smarter, I would like to avoid, maybe have a 5 mile death march as opposed to a 30 mile. Like that just kills your soul. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys have been part of the death march. Like, oh God.
Yes, it's relatable.
Yeah. Where you're like, I'm literally canceling all my races. I'm never doing this again. This sucks. And then you're done and you're like, well, that was great. Let's do it again.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Right. I wanted to ask you, so it's funny because our previous episode, I guess it'll be last week's episode with Kaylee Frederick, she had an interesting answer for her spirit animal too. And so I was telling Michelle before this that I feel like it's a prerequisite for these Badwater runners to have a really obscure and interesting spirit animal, because I want you to talk about yours because I had never even heard of it before.
oh yeah. So one, love Kaylee. Kaylee's awesome. She's part of
It's
this
amazing.
like girl group we've got for Badwater called the Next Level Psychopath.
She
So
was a
yeah,
fun conversation to have for sure.
yeah. I love her so much. She's awesome. But yeah, so my spirit animal was it's called the Devil's Hole Pupfish. And it lives in Death Valley. It's in this little just water hole in the middle of Death Valley, and the pupfish only lives there, the Devil's Hole pupfish, and there's like maybe at one time 300, like max in the wild, because they count them. I think it's twice a year, so people on the surface will count, and then they'll have divers kind of count. I think they're really only stay in the top 100 feet. They don't know how deep this hole goes, but it's really small. You should Google it. And so
I did right before this.
yeah, and it's like they've got fencing around it. It's like if you go to Wikipedia or like some other stuff about the Devil's Hole Puffer,
Yeah.
you'll know it's one of the first endangered like species to be added to the endangered species list, and it was like a big deal.
Blue fish.
Yeah, and
And
they're
the
called
water is
pupfish.
the
Yeah,
water's like
because
what, 90 degrees or something?
yeah, it's really hot. It's really inhospitable. Most fish would die, but the pupfish have just like that's kind of how they've grown up. Like that's just how they've like evolved so they can live there. Yeah, so it got down to maybe like 30 at one time just due to factors. But since getting on the endangered species list or whatever, I think within the last maybe 4 or 5, maybe 10 years, I don't know, they've created sort of a replica of the devil's hole, so that they can, like have fish on hand to replace the fish. So I think they maybe have 200 or 400, like that live in captivity, and then they have the like 100 to 300 in that are wild. So it's just a cool little fish. And I recently got it tattooed on me because I
Oh
love
my
it.
That's
God,
awesome.
I
It's so
love
cute.
it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And they call it the pupfish because it's very playful, like a
Aw,
puppy.
That is so
I love that.
amazing. That's incredible.
Yeah. What was
Oh,
Kaylee's?
A Wolverine.
That is pretty obscure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
just
can
thought it was
see
different
that.
because I mean we've
Yeah.
asked the question before and it's like we'll get bear, like like just kind of things you think of more commonly. And then Kaylee's was Wolverine. I was like, well, that's an interesting response. And then yours was something I'd never even heard of before. So I was like, I guess it's a Badwater thing.
Parents is like, I've probably looked at every picture of a pupfish that exists because there's not that many pictures.
That's funny. Did you discover them when you were at
I
Badwater the
love it.
first time?
Probably, I when I went to Badwater for the first time, it was 2022 as a crew, and you just become obsessed with the area. It's just Death Valley is such a cool area. So now, as part of my training for 2023 and 2024, it was not only like physical, but also like getting to know the history of the race, getting to know the history of the area, and so just like doing research on Death Valley is how I came across the pupfish.
Have you seen them there? Do you like
No,
you
but I
haven't been?
want to like write an email and maybe go to Death Valley outside of Badwater time, like a vacation to Death Valley,
Yeah.
and like write them and be like, "Hey, I'm obsessed with the pupfish. I even have a tattoo. Can you please take me there and let me see the
Yes.
pupfish? Because they're surrounded by like barbed wire and
So
stuff,
you
so that no
can't
one.
even
They're
see
super
them?
protected.
Wow,
No.
that's crazy.
Maybe if you
Wow.
go there with binoculars
Oh
and
my
kind of
gosh.
look in, but you can't walk up to the. Yeah,
Just link
no.
this podcast. Link this podcast episode.
Yeah.
We're making
Emily,
people aware of the
Of the pupfish.
pupfish and be like, listen, I'm bringing to light.
save the pupfish.
Yeah. So
Emily, you need to do this. Yeah.
yeah, save the pupfish. So that's the funny part of the pupfish history is like back in the day they wanted to save the water, and so they were trying to stop some corporation. I'm leaving out a lot of details, but like basically they're like this maybe corporation can't come in and do something because it's affecting them. And so these people in Pahrump, Nevada, which is like sort of the last big town outside of Death Valley on the Nevada side. There were bumper stickers that said "Save the pupfish," and these people in Pahrump had bumper stickers that said "Kill the pupfish."
Oh my gosh.
I know. I think they were just annoyed with all the government oversight, blah, blah, whatever. I just thought, I'm like, why would you say kill the pupfish?
Aw.
I know. Yeah. Random spirit animal, but I do love the pupfish.
I think it's a perfect animal for you too, because I feel like you come into like ultra running with just a very playful, positive attitude. And
Yeah.
I know whenever I see you at like races, you're always like smiling and perky and you're just kind of a fun presence. So it's fun. You
Which is
definitely.
so
Yeah,
funny because I was
you
like
have
an
it.
angsty teenager, and now everyone describes me as like bubbly and perky, and now I'm like, no, I'm still dark and twisty, but no, I just have to accept that I'm like bubbly.
You're a pupfish. You're a pupfish.
Well, the interesting thing is you have this joyous energy that it's effervescent. Like, I can feel it even here through this like technology
Yeah.
connection. But you gotta be tenacious as heck to pursue and succeed in these races that you choose. Grit and determination and perseverance. And that's very unique. And I think it's interesting that this playful little pupfish, like, just surviving a hole in 90
Death
degree
Valley.
water, like, dude, that is badass.
With little oxygen, yeah, exactly. No like stores, yeah.
Oh, what a beautiful parallel or analogy or whatever. It's cool.
Yeah, that's
Oh yeah.
awesome. I love
And
that.
being optimistic, I feel like is a skill in ultra running
Yeah.
because like
Yes.
I love that David Goggins is inspiring people to like do stuff, but I find his like just like everything's got to be hard for you to succeed. I just don't that just doesn't vibe with me. I'm
Yeah.
more like, go with the flow, and you can be comfortable and you can be happy, and I feel like that's how it gets me to the end, is the optimism, not the like, I'm just going to grit through this the entire time. Of course, I use that, kind of grit and endurance when I get to the hard parts, but the whole
Yep.
time I'm trying to stay happy, because it makes the race more fun,
Yeah.
and it gets you further to the end. Like, it just, yeah, I don't know. I feel like optimism is just like a really good skill to have to keep you from like just quitting. Like, as opposed to seeing the finish line is the only time I can be happy. I'm trying to be happy the whole race.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've
And
talked about it before on a podcast, like you use like Jocko Willing's like good.
Yeah.
And
yes,
that's kind
I
of
love that.
bringing that optimism to that, like, well,
Yep.
good, it's hard, like, and
Yeah.
so, and I feel like that's kind of bringing that optimism to those hard times.
Oh yeah, like at Badwater this year. Great example. So this was called as the biblical year, just because, oh my God, there were so many things that just were like crazy. On top of already being Badwater 135, it was extremely hot. Like, this was literally the hottest year in the history, like the hottest average temperature in Death Valley in the history of like forever. Like, I think the average temperature was 108. That includes like night and daytime. Or does it? Don't quote me. There was an article. But anyway, it was super hot, and the race started, or before the race started, it was 128, which like scared the crap out of me. I'm like, oh my God, like, I know I want it hot, but like, this is really hot. And then, so like, I thought, it's scary but cool. Maybe it'll be a really hot year, and I'll appreciate that. And then it rained on us at the start, which was wild. Death
Sounded
Valley gets,
absolutely wild. Yeah.
yeah, less than on average 2 inches of rain a year. So, like, and it's now raining on us, like, wild. It was like sideways rain, like 40-mile-per-hour winds, and
Oh,
I'm just like, guys, I mean, this sucks, but it's pretty cool. We get to say we're running this year at Badwater with this rain,
yeah.
and then but I've probably, there's going to be humidity now, but that I deal with that because I live in North Carolina and all that. And then there was a swarm of bees.
Yeah, and I heard
Yes.
about the crazy story for why they were there.
Yes, so it kind of all came together. Was like, I heard there were bees at like the 50-mile like cutoff or whatever, like for whatever reason. And then as we're going up Town Pass, there's just kind of maybe one bee, and then there's two bees, and then there's three bees, and we're like, what in the world? Like, and then we get to the top, and there's this medic's car, and on the back of it, it says, I forget exactly, but like maybe, medic, cover skin maximally bees. And so like there's bees just all around. Like, the medic gets out and he's like, "You're good," because I completely covered myself for 135 just to limit sun exposure. But my husband, who's pacing me, had like shorts on, so the guy was like, "You need to cover up," and he's like, "Well, we're getting to the car and I'll do that, but there's nothing I can do right now." But yeah,
Right.
swarm of bees, and so we learned, like, there's a National Park Service article you can read, that a truck was hauling bees through Death Valley, and it flipped because
Oh my
of the
gosh.
steep incline. And so now the bees live
Right.
there. And I got a little more context onto
It's like
why he was
infested,
hauling
right?
bees. Yeah, the thought was that they were taking the bees from the bees on the East Coast to the almond farms in California. So
Yes.
kind of transporting those, and now they just live in Death Valley. So that happened last November, 2023.
My gosh.
And people are like, how do bees survive? Well, it's at like 5,000 feet. So
Yeah.
it's not like in the basin where it's like 130 degrees. But still, yeah, we're like, God, 135, it rained on us, it's humid, it's crazy hot, and now there's bees. But it kind of was like one of those good, situations. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's such like wow, what an extraordinary example of how in this case, you can have your plan dialed in to a T. Your scratch is packed. You've got all your stuff, you know, your timetables. You've got every single thing you need to have to be prepared. And the world goes topsy-turvy and the environment around, like those are massive, massive things that obviously you can't control, but you can't even, like, how do you prepare for a swarm of
You
bees that's
Yeah.
don't. You
infested?
don't.
I mean, if you're allergic, you like just, if
Carry your
you're going to be
EpiPen.
outside, you carry an EpiPen.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just kind of suck it up. Like,
And
yeah.
that's one of the beauties of ultra running is like really one of the greatest skills you need is just to be a problem solver
Yeah.
and be flexible and adaptive. And just shit's gonna happen, and you have to be able to figure it out as you go.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, you
really
can
cool.
learn all the challenges possible in a race, and so you can have, the solutions like when they arise, but then your final tool is just like you said, being flexible for, whatever comes up, I'm just gonna address it as it occurs, and hopefully I can solve the problem, if not at least mitigate it a little.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you, Emily, for
Sage
coming
advice.
on today. You are Hungry Vegan Runner on Instagram if people want to
Yeah.
follow along your adventures. I know you always do such great race recaps, so they're fun to read.
I still need to write my Badwater one. Oh,
I'm
like,
waiting for
Oh, I can't wait to read that one.
yeah.
So I'll link your Instagram in the show notes if people want to give you a follow. But yeah, thank you for coming on today. This was a great conversation.
Awesome. No, thank you guys. This was really fun. I appreciate
It's so much fun to chat with you.
Yeah. So that wraps up today. Thank you guys for listening. We always appreciate your support and you listening to the show. And we'll catch you next week. And just remember, in the meantime, to stay curious and embrace the challenges.
Thanks all.
Have a great week.
We appreciate your support so much. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to leave us a review and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tag us on our Instagram at Let's Run That Again and give us a shout out when you listen. And as always, we welcome feedback from you and are open to ideas and guests for future episodes. Reach out on our Instagram or email us at letsrunthatagainpod@gmail.com.